Hi, welcome back. Over the past 5 or 6 weeks or so, we have actually built out our Nest backend to accept HTTP requests and to take those requests and translate them into SQL statement and to retrieve data or to update data from our relational database, our MySQL database. So now the back end has been completed, the Nest portion has been completed. What we will start doing from this episode onwards is to connect our Angular front end to this back end. If you recall, we built out the Angular front end in season one, and in season one, the data was actually stored in an IndexedDB database, which is on the browser. So today, what we will do is this: we will convert our Angular front end application to make HTTP calls to the to our Nest backend. Before I continue, let me just set up as usual. Set up our branch first. So I will create a new branch called part 26. Again, just let me check. So I'm on 26, and then I'll change to the front end. Uh, Currently, the Angular version, since we're going to work with Angular, I want to update Angular to the latest version. So the Angular has just released version 11 a few days ago, or maybe about a week ago. So it's telling me. So if I do Angular version, it's telling me that the local version, that's my project, is actually on version 10, but the CLI version that I've installed is 11.02. So that's the latest version. This is what we'll do. I'm going to do an upgrade, and then after that, I'll explain what we're going to do with Angular, how we're going to convert the Angular to use the Nest backend. So to do update, you just use ng update, and I'll go. So we update the CLI, and we also update the core. I'll do a force. There are some incompatibility issues which I'll show you afterwards, but I've checked it out. It's okay, so we can perform a force just to get Angular to do a force. So notice that if you don't use a force, it will actually stop here because it is complaining that there are some incompatibilities, but this is okay. Let's get back to the explanation. This is what we're going to do. We are going to write a new persistence, write a new service to take the request. So previously, when we create a new bot, when we update a bot, all that update goes into the IndexedDB. Uh, what we will do in this episode is to write a backend module to take our request and make HTTP calls. So these are the HTTP calls that we have built up for Nest to pass them to the Nest application backend, and the Nest application will return. The Nest application will take the data, write it to our MySQL database, and then will return the the data. We've got a few options of doing this. This is what we'll be doing. If you recall, in the Nest, when we created the Nest application, we created an interface, and then in the Nest backend, we created a service called persistent service, which implements this kbot database. The kbot database will have methods like insert kbot, update kbot, etc. So go back and look up the previous few episodes. And the way this is used in Nest, again, if you recall, is we wrote two controllers. The responsibility of a controller is to accept HTTP requests, and then depending on whether it's a GET or a POST, the controller will call the appropriate service. The controller will collect the data, call the appropriate service to perform the update. What we will do now is this: we will write the we will write a backend for Angular, for our front end Angular, called backend persistent service, which will also implement the kbot database interface. And our Angular component, will collect the data from the user, call this service to make the call. So this service will pass all the data to this backend persistent service. The backend persistent service will make calls to Nest. Nest So the call will go to the controller over HTTP. Nest will take this data, save it to the relational database, and it returns responses that extends from the response space class. Okay, so this is what we are going to do today. So we are going to do the Angular portion. Let's see if we have completed. We have completed our updates. Now we will start the application. Oh, before we start, I also want to do a few things. Uh, I'm going to add in here, just like what I did for let me see if I can find it. Uh, for Nest, where I added the path, okay, so that the common directory, the all the all the utilities in the all the modules in the common directory, okay, can be referenced by just saying common. I'll do the same thing for Angular. I'll just do it here. Oops, I'll say this is common. Okay, so I'll start I can now open my editor. Okay, so now we are going to, and this is probably where we want to go. So, okay, here. So what we will do is this, we will start by creating this guy, which extends the kboard database. I'll create a file here. I will call it, uh, let's, let's call it back the same name, backend persistent service. Okay, so this is a service, right? So I will say this is injectable. Injectable. So export class, say backend persistent service. Okay, and this class is going to implement the kboard database. Okay, so you just import that first. So common persistence. So implement the kboard database. Okay, and we'll just implement a few methods that is in there. Like so, and then we just go. We just fill up all this first, so that the compiler doesn't complain. So we just put all this return now. Okay, okay, so like that, and then we need to also import in the kboard and the kboard summary. So model, the kboard, and the kboard summary. Okay, so we're going to make HTTP calls. So we're going to make HTTP calls. In Angular, to use HTTP call, we need to import in the HTTP module. So to import in the HTTP module, we will import it in. There are two places that we can import. We can either import it into kboard module or the in the app module. So let's import it into app module. Maybe the HTTP module will be in the future maybe used by other modules. Oops. So we're going to import this guy here. So let me just add the import up here. So it's in common HTTP module. And the thing that you want to import is the HttpClient module. So that's the one. Okay. And we're going to add it here. Client module. Okay, so since we have injected it at the at the root module, at the app module, this HTTP is now available throughout the entire application. So what we'll do is we'll go back to this backend service, right? And then we'll inject the HTTP client in here. But first of all, defining a constructor and just say private HTTP client. So like like that. Okay. So now the first one we're going to implement. So let's run our application first, our Angular application first, and let's see what is it that we want to do, which method that we want to implement first. So let's do ng-serve, and also I want to start the my server as well. Okay, so let's look at the module that we want to, what is it you want to do first. So we'll go localhost. So remember, currently now the application is still pulling information from our database, from our IndexedDB database. So this call goes to the database to list. If you recall, it lists out all the kboard modules, right? So the first method that we want to implement, it would be this method, get kboards. So it will return the list of all the kboards, right? All the kboards that where we click on it to get the details. So this is the first method we want to implement. So if again, uh, let's go back to our backend and see what is the controller. So that method is this call. It's a get to the kboard, the user ID, and that will return to us the summary list of our bots. So this method makes the call to API kboards and the user ID. Okay, so this is what we do. Let's define our URL. Currently it's 8080. Don't worry about this one first. We can make it configurable afterwards. API kboards, and then we want to put in the user ID. Okay. Uh, Remember, the kboards also allows us to specify query parameters in here. Okay. So since these are optional, I'll just say like this. So I want to limit it to 10, and the offset, we start from 0, right? So we mimic, what is stated here. So I will create the query string. Params. Okay, and the way you set the params is like this. You go set the name of the parameter, which should be those two parameters, limit and offset. And the query string has to be a string. So we need to say like this. Okay, and then we do the same thing for offset. Okay. Now we will make the call. We'll use the call. We'll use the HTTP client. Okay, and then we will perform a get to the above method. So to this method, to this URL. And if you remember, we are actually returning the kboard response here. Return the kboard response. So what we can do is this: we can say this method, the get is a parameterized. It's a parameterized method. In the sense that it's a generic method. I can say what the method is returning. So I will say get kbots response. Okay, and I'll say this is the URL and these are the parameters. Uh, the HTTP client, returns an observable. So we will convert this into a promise, and we'll just return the data. Say then, so the response, which is the kbot response. Okay, and then we say response data. So the data is the kbot summary. So very simple, right? So that's the whole purpose of us creating the common the that's the whole purpose of creating the common this common thing, this all these shared models between the client and the server, right? So that the response is consistent, and we cut down we reduce our mistakes. Now, this method will be used in the the first component, which is this component. Okay, so this component. So anyway, before I do that, so this method, this is a service, right? So it has to be provided. Uh, it has to be provided. Now this is a little bit different. Normally, when we provide a service, so let's look at how we provide a service. So normally, when we provide a service, uh, not this guy. Normally, when we provide a service, we give the we give the name of the class, okay? But in here, what we want to do is this. What we want to do with backend services is we want to allow different types of backend. So we want to allow a remote backend, like re- making a call, saving data to Nest, or eventually in the future, if we do implement service worker, the full service worker, we may want to have a backend. Uh, we want to have a persistence backend that save data to our index DB, right? So we do not want to go ahead and change our code. One way to provide the service is to provide it through the interface. So we are saying that the service is an interface, but the implementation can be anything. The the tricky part of it is this: in in TypeScript, because you cannot annotate a a service, you can only annotate classes. The way to go about providing an Angular service as an interface is to create what is called an injection token, and say the injection token is basically an interface, and then we'll say that when we declare the service, we will say that this injection token is backed by this particular class for the service. Okay, so let's see how we do that. So the first thing we want to do is this: we want to create what is known as an injection token. So let me move this down here. What is known as injection token, and this injection token may be used in a lot of different places. So I'll just do like this: export. I'll call this injection token persist. I call this persistent service, and this is an injection token. Okay, so this is an injection token, and the injection token, okay, the 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 type, the parameterized type is kbot database. Okay, and here we will just give a string name. Okay, we will just call it kbot uh, database. Okay, so this is the injection token. So now we say, instead of now providing this as our service, okay, we will now use this method to provide. So remember, this is our injection token. So we will now say like this. There are many ways to provide services in Angular. If you provide a concrete class, you just do like this. So this one, I'm going to provide my service as an interface. So I will say provide. You create you create object, okay, and then one of the attribute is provide, and then you put your injection token here like that, okay, and then you say this this token, injection token, is backed by, you can back it by a class, a factory, which is a function, to dynamically create a class. Use an existing class or whatever. Use a value, like you want to hard code a value, like for example, an API key. I'm going to use a class. So I'll say class, and the class is backend persistence service. So you got to make sure that the backend persistence service, oh, constant. Okay. So you have to make sure that the backend persistence service actually uh, implements the K database interface, which we have. Okay. So that's all there is to the service. Okay. So let me remove this guy. Okay. So now we will inject. So instead of injecting, in the usual way, generally we'll inject this class, right? Now we'll inject this token, and then when we inject this token, this we will receive the an implementation of the kbot database interface, which is this class. So let's go to see how we use this. So the class we want to go is this the class here. Okay. Let me just change this guy first. Okay, so we want to first of all change this. So this is previously the service. So we want to change this by first of all doing this. We want to say inject, okay, annotate a method inject, and then we're going to inject the persistence service. That's our injection token. Okay, and now we will say the interface, not the class, but the interface. Okay, bot database, like like that. Okay, so the the implementation class needs to have an injectable, okay? Although we are not injecting this directly, but it needs to have an injectable. You need to annotate it with an injectable. Okay? So like this. Uh, the, again, this guy here returns kbot summary. So we will come to here and we'll change this to kbot summary. Okay. Let me delete this guy. Okay. And now we will say this. We go get kbots. That's the method, right? So this method, so this when we call with this method, so we need to pass in the user ID, the limit and the offset. So the limit and offset we have default, so that's okay. What we need to do is this: we need to pass in the user ID. Okay, right? So how do we get a user ID? Okay, so at the moment it's quite difficult to get a user ID from here. So imagine in a future episode, what we're going to do is that we're going to allow the user to log in. Okay, so when the user log in, we will get the user ID. So for the time being, we will create a service called an identity service just as a placeholder. So what I'll do here is this: I'll create a service. I'll call this identity service. Okay. So this is a placeholder for something that we're going to implement in the future for authentication. So I'll say injectable because this is a service. And then I'll say export class identity service. And then I'll just create one method called get user ID. And then that will just return. Currently, I'm going to hard code it to Fred since we're using Fred. Okay. And let's provide this in the app module. So I'm going to provide this here. Okay. So I'll provide this here. So let's go back to my class. Let's go back to here, and I will inject the identity service in. Okay. So now we will just go get user ID. Okay. So one last thing before uh, we can run that. Originally, the original app program, the original bots is a list of kbots. Now it's a kbot summary. We need to go to the view and change the attribute. So main kbot component HTML here. So the only thing we need to change is this guy here. Again, if you look at the models, the kbot summary returns something called card count. So we're going to change this to card count. Okay, so let's run this guy again. Okay, so we'll click here. Okay, so now we'll see that the call has actually gone through. The call has actually gone over, but we are hitting something called cause. The browser is blocking. Okay. So again, if we go here, sorry, we go here, we actually see the call has actually came from Angular, but but it is being blocked by the browser. The result is being blocked by the browser because the response didn't have some cause header. Okay, because we are making cross origin requests. So the calls did not have header. So we need to add calls header when our Nest application, our backend application returns the result. Okay, so that can be very easily fixed. But what we'll do is this: uh, we will go to the main file. Okay, we will add an option here to allow us to enable or disable calls. Okay, so Nest is really really nice to work with. So you just enable or disable it. So I'm going to create an option here that says cost, and the type is a Boolean type. The default, I'm going to disable it by just saying false, right? So you need to explicitly enable it. And let me do this. So so it's been a while. So this one basically reads the command line, what option you put, and then we pass the value in, right? So in here we are just going to pass into our bootstrap the entire argv, the option. Okay, and then we will report just to fix back the port API, the port variable again, and then we will also do the same thing by just doing this substitute port with cause. Okay, and then we can say if cause is enabled, okay, so it's a boolean command line option. If cause is enabled, then we just want to enable it by just going add enable cause. So very simple. Okay, so the Nest application that we've created. Here, I just want to print out, just console log out the option to say that we have enabled calls. So I'll say this. Okay. Okay. So let's look at this thing. So notice that calls is disabled, right? So how do we enable it? Very simple. We just go node, right? And then we give the name of our node application. Okay, and then we just go dash dash that to enable it. So now calls has been enabled. So let's test our application again. So notice that now we get our bot. Okay, so let's make this permanent by or at least permanent during our development by adding it to the startup here. Here. Okay, so this is the line where we run it. We just go calls. Yeah, so calls is enabled. Right, so let's start all over again. So this is our application. We click on here, we get the request. So all this is now actually coming from the backend. So the next call that we want to make is this. So when we click on this guy, right, we are retrieving we are retrieving the details of this bot, and that method is actually in here. So this is the method. The get. Right. So where is my get method? Okay, so this is the this is the resource. So we specify. So if on top here we got a kbot, the user ID, followed by the bot ID. Okay. So the next method that we're going to implement, we're going to add is this method here. So this is get API kbot. Okay, and then you have the user ID followed by the bot ID. Okay, so we have the user ID followed by the bot ID. Again, we'll just do this. We'll take this guy, take the URL. Let me remove, oops, the S from here. And so the user ID followed by the bot ID. Okay, and now we'll do the same thing as before. You go this HTTP, you do a get, and now this is going to return to us the kbot response. So this guy, kbot response. Okay, pass in the URL. We'll again convert it to the promise. So response will return the data. So the data is the kbot, which matches uh, our return. So so if you click on this, the controller, the component that is called is the update component, which is this component. So we will do this. So let me clean up this a little bit first. Okay, so what we will do is this. We will inject in our service. So we will put in our injection token. Okay, and the interface is kbot database, which is this guy here, and the method is this. So this is the method. Okay, so the engine when we navigate from the masters list into the detail into this particular interface in this component, the engine init loads the uh, load the load the method. Load the details of the data, and all we need to do is just do this. Right, kbot service. We'll go get kbot. Okay, so get kbot. We pass in the user ID and the bot ID. So we already have the bot ID. So the user ID we can get it again from our service, from our identity service. Okay, so we do this ID service, that user ID. So the second one is done. So let's go ahead and try this. Let me check if there's any error by looking at here. Okay, so we can ignore that one first. So this is the update. We ignore the update first. We are not doing the update yet. So let's just reload this guy. Okay, so now if we let's click on this one. So we get the details of our bot. Cancel. Get the details of our bot. Okay. So now the next thing we probably want to do is want to perform an update. Okay. So the update. Let's go back to here. The update is a put method. So this one, the resource, the resource is exactly the same as a get. Let's go back and work on our update. So that's our update. So I can copy this guy over. Okay. So that's the this thing. Okay. So it's going to be very simple. In here, we just go this HTTP. We now use a put, and then we will say kbot. Put kbot response. Again, this is from the shared from the shared. This is of shared module, right? The response module. We'll pass in the URL, and then we'll pass in the bot. We'll pass the bot as the payload. Same thing, we'll convert this to a promise. And then we go then response. Okay, response data. Okay, very simple. So now let's go and fix our our update. So if you recall, right, in the when we implemented NestJS, when we implement the backend, right? Originally, when we started off in season one, when we create Angular, the created by is actually an email. Okay. So, however, when we started to implement the backend, I figured that we shouldn't actually put the email in here because the email will be part of a URL. So, and then we will expose the email, right? So I changed this to the user ID. So this is now a user ID, but the original component actually views this as an email. So we need to change the keyboard component to say that this is now no longer an email, because when we validate the when we validate the keyboard component, we say that this is an email field, and if it's not email, we will not be allowed to perform a click, perform an update, or those buttons that modify the component will be disabled. So we have to go and change. We have to go and change that. The components are here. So this is the first one. Okay, so let me clean this up again. Right. So let's look at the email. So if you recall, this is our. So when we created the group, right? So this is the email. The created by is the email. So we want to delete this guy. We do not want this. And at the same time, we mentioned that. So we mentioned that there is a length. There is a length. The created by has a length. It's not an email, but it's got a length. A minimum length of 3. The maximum length actually it should be 16. Maximum length of 16. Okay. So we want to do the same thing here. So we want to say validators min is 3. Validators max is 16. Okay. Now we need to go and change the view. So keyboard view. Okay. So this is just text. Okay. This is just text. And then we want to say the owner's user ID, right? And please enter your user ID, right? Between 3 and 16 characters. Okay. In fact, this field shouldn't even be filled in because once we authenticated, it shouldn't even be filled in. But since it's legacy, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it here. Okay. So now that that restriction has been lifted, what we can do is this: we can just try and add something here. Okay, sorry, we haven't finished yet. So let's go back to our update, right? So we'll do the update. So you say this update keyboard. Update keyboard takes the keyboard. Okay, takes the keyboard. So let's go to the our backend. So update keyboard, right? So let me just it's API keyboard user ID board ID. Okay, so this is the method that we'll be calling. So everything seems okay. So we have implemented this. So this makes a put using the data, using the bot that we pass in, okay, to this resource. So this is the update from the component. So the component takes the bot takes the uh, takes whatever that's passed in and merge it with the existing bot, and then send it to the backend. Okay. So let's test this guy out. So let me just do something here. Let me just put okay to be updated. So if you do an update now, or maybe I'll add another card here, another card here. Okay, so you now click on update. Uh, User ID is not defined. Okay, so let's have a look. ES44. Where is that? Backend persistence. 44. Oh, user ID. Okay, so the user ID is going to come from the ID service. ID. We don't have an ID service here. Okay, so let's inject in the identity service. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is this ID service, and then get user ID, and then the bot ID we're gonna take it from the bot. Okay, right. So let's try this again. So we'll try this and just say to update. So let's try updating this. So if we do that, so this one says that there is actually an error, and let's look at the error. Whereas the error comes from the HTTP response. So this is our error. So notice that we added the class validator. So the class validator is telling us that the priority is is not a number. Okay, so what is basically saying is this. Oops. So let me delete that. So okay. So I think I've got. I think okay. So let me just go ahead and delete that because I was using I was editing something the other day and my co- my power died my battery failed. So, oh, so okay, let me sorry because I think I had one of the thing open, right? Okay, so yeah, so just now I had a editor open, so let me just try that again. Mod, common model. Okay, so yeah, right. So so basically, what he's saying is this, right? Sorry, just now that one was I've opened model, in another edit in another terminal, and Vim doesn't like Vim doesn't like two editors editing the same file, right? So anyway, I've closed it, and now it's okay. So basically, what it's saying is this thing here, this priority here, is not a number. Priority is not a number, although it's represented as a number, but the type is not a number, right? Okay. So we can fix it by first of all saying number. So this priority field can either take priority or number. However, that actually doesn't fix it. What we need to do is that we need to explicitly convert the priority to uh, to to number. Okay, and the way we're going to do that is actually in here. Oops. The way we're going to do that is actually in here, in this merge bot. So merge bot is a utility under common. Utility. So this is the merge bot. So all these cards here with priority, we need to convert it into uh, into number. I'll just write a simple method to do that. So I'll just say priority to number. So you take a card, okay, and what you do is this. It will return back the saved card, and then what you do is this. You go card priority, okay, and then we just say parse int card priority. Okay, now we will just do a map of this guy, map priority to number. So that will convert all that. So when we merge the bot, you automatically convert that into into a number as well. Okay, so let's try again. Yeah. Okay. So I got a mistake here. So this one should be assignment. Okay. So let's try again. We can go updating this bot. Right. So let's add another card. So let's perform the update. And now we have updated. Now we have updated the bot. So let me delete one. Updated, right? So notice that this cut count is one. Okay, so we have implemented the third method, which is update. So let's go and try and implement the delete method. So let's do delete. So the delete method looks like this. So again, let me just type this. Very simple. Again, the URL is going to be exactly the same. So let me pull from here. So you got user ID and bot ID, and then I'll just do this HTTP delete, right? And then it's going to return to us the delete kbot response URL. And we'll return the, the data. Okay, so let's go and add this delete method over to update keyboard component. So this is the delete method. We will change this to delete kbot, and the delete kbot takes the user ID and the bot ID. So we already know how to get the kbot ID. We got identity service, get user ID, and the kbot we're just going to get it from the bot ID. Okay. So let's try doing this. So let's go back first. Let's go back first. Let's try to delete this guy. So we hold this guy. Okay. And now that is deleted. Okay. So the last one, it's a create. It's a create method. Okay. So now it's crashing because we are still using the old kbot service. So let's go and do our last our last component, update our last component, which is this guy, which is this create here. Okay, and we will again do the same thing. We will inject in the persistent service with our injection token. This will be changed to kbot database. Okay, and so so that is that. Now we will. Okay, so I think I jumped the gun a bit. Maybe we should just go and implement the, the backend persistence this guy first. Okay, so insert kbot. Okay, so insert kbot. Let's go back here and look at how we do the insert kbot controller. So the insert is a post method, right? And the URL is just the user ID. So it's a post method. So we'll construct the URL. We will say this ID service, get user ID. Okay, and we've got a bot here. So we need to do the same thing as we do in the update. We need to convert all the priorities from the enumerated type into number. So we let's do this. Cards equals to bot cards map, and then we will just say priority to number. Okay. So now we will this HTTP method. We do a post, right? And the response is post kbot response. This one returns a new bot ID, and then we'll pass in our payload, which is bot. Okay, and then we'll just convert this to a promise. And then we just go response will return will return the data, okay, which is a string. Now let's go and update the create. So we've got a keyboard. So the update is here. Insert keyboard. Okay, we will pass in the board. Let's see. Maybe we should do the update here. Yeah, okay, let's do the update here. Okay, details. I need to change this priority to number. Okay, so keyboard service, I can remove that. Right, so let's do this here instead of inside this method. Okay, and let me remove this. Oh, okay, so this is a bit getting a bit crowded here. Right, okay. So when we want to perform, when we want to create a new board, what we do is this: we change all the board from the priority enumerated type to number, and then we call insert. And what insert does is this insert will call the post method. Okay, we should take the URL, which will be this resource. Okay, so this is let's put this up here. This post API kboard, and then the user ID. The payload is the bot, and then we send it over. Nest will insert it into a database and then return to us the new bot ID, which currently we are not using. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new bot and test this guy out. Okay, so we'll say this is a new bot created by Fred. Okay, and we'll add one card. Okay, so let's create this guy. So this is created. Let me just put a star behind so that I know that this is what I've created. Okay, so this is what I've created. So I've got one one card. Maybe I can perform an update. Okay, so no card. Right. So now if I want to delete it, I can delete it. So as you can see, we have now fully implemented our our backend persistence, and Angular is now making calls. Angular is now using HTTP to update to save data to NestJS. Okay. So this concludes this episode. In the next episode, what we are going to do is we will be getting the Angular application to be served from from Nest. Okay, and I'll show you how to handle those kind of development. Currently, as you know, we need to enable calls on Nest because the Angular and the Nest application is two separate applications. Okay, so we'll look at the other model in the upcoming episode. So thank you very much and stay safe.